Women have been an integral part of our societies ever since the dawn of man. It would be almost inconceivable and impossible to live without them. But throughout history, there have been a few cases where society tries to separate the sexes for whatever reason with varying degrees of success. Our story today is of the extreme. The strongest claim of a person living a complete life and never seeing or coming into contact with a woman. Michael Tolotos was born in 1856 to unknown parents, but immediately his life was succumbed with tragedy. His mother did not survive the childbirth, and his father's whereabouts are shrouded in mystery. It is said that those who first came across the boy were unsure about his parental lineage, and unable to find his closest relatives. Therefore, the men carried him and left him at the doorsteps of an Orthodox monastery atop of Mount Athos. The young baby was adopted by the monastery, and the monks named him Michael Tolotos. Legend has it that from the moment he entered the gates, he never again ventured back through them, essentially living his entire life inside the confines of this sacred place. Cloaked by beautiful chestnut and other types of Mediterranean forest, the steep slopes of Mount Athos are punctuated by 20 imposing monasteries. The property includes the entire narrow strip of the easternmost three peninsulas of Chalcidice, which jut into the Aegean Sea in northern Greece. An Orthodox spiritual center since the 10th century, Mount Athos has enjoyed a self-administered status since the Byzantine times. Inside the monastery, farming constitutes an important part of the monk's everyday life. Michael would have grown up learning the ways of the plow to go alongside with his rigorous monk training towards the ultimate goal of spiritual enlightenment. A law called Άβατον in Greek, instated in the year 1046 by the Byzantine emperor Constantine Monomachos, prohibits the entry of women and even incredibly women animals atop the holy mountain. This law was placed so that the men living in the many monasteries could spend their lives in absolute celibacy with peace. The monks are of the opinion that the presence of woman alters their path towards celibacy and ultimately spiritual enlightenment. Other notable rules that Michael would have needed to follow were no shaving, no bathing, no fighting, no arguing, and no asking what lies beyond the walls of the monastery. This truly means, according to rules imposed by the monk, the only time Michael would have learned or talked about women would have been during his scripture studies. Although Michael's supporters claiming that he had never been in contact with a woman is largely regarded as truthful, there are some skeptics who point out some interesting roadblocks. To start, there is the problem of wet nurses. Michael was born in 1856, and just like all other babies, he would have needed breastfeeding in the first couple years to enable to grow and survive. Obviously, with his mom having died in childbirth, the monks would have needed to come up with a solution. Baby formula, a well-known substitute for breastfeeding, wasn't invented until 1865, 10 years after he was born. This leads to critics claiming Michael would have needed a wet nurse and therefore did in fact have contact with the other sex. But interestingly enough, and what defenders of Michael say, is that there is another way he could have gotten his vital nutriments. During this time in history, animals were often used as substitute wet nurses for infants, especially after the rise of syphilis, which increased the health risks of wet nursing. Goats and donkeys were therefore used widely to feed abandoned babies across hospitals in the 18th and 19th centuries in Europe. Unfortunately though, there is no way to confirm or to deny which method was used, which means that historians can only speculate on the issue. Another problem that has been put forward is 3 separate instances of women legally and illegally entering the confines of Mount Athos during Michael's life. The first was in 1905 by a young Russian princess. The circumstances around the visit are unknown, but it is assumed that she must have gotten approval from the religious authorities in order to enter the sacred grounds. Although she was on the premise during Michael's life, it is unlikely they came across each other on the immense 33,000-hectare property. The other 2 instances are both women who illegally got into the sacred site. They disguised themselves as men in order to pass security and gain access to this forbidden place. A woman named Aliki did it first in 1929. She was a Greek woman who was actually the current Miss Europe at the time, although her full motives for entering the monastery are unknown. The second woman entering illegally was in 1931 by a French journalist, Maryse Choisy. She entered by disguising herself as a sailor and eluded detection. She even wrote a book after her experience called 1 Month with Men, which became wildly popular. Again, it is impossible to ascertain whether or not Michael would have met or came in contact with these women, but it is very unlikely they managed to get to the top of the monastery where Michael was staying and have met him. Ultimately, in the end, Michael died in 1938 at the age of 82. He was given a special burial by all the monks living on Mount Athos. They deemed his burial so special because all the monks truly believed that he was the only man to have ever lived without seeing a woman. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and hopefully we will see you in the next one.